All right, welcome back once again, everybody. I'm Don Seifrit. It's the Dr. Tree Fruit and Don podcast. I'm here with Dr. Kari Peters. Say hi, Kari.
Hey there, hi.
I'm here with Dr. Greg Krawczyk. Say hi, Greg.
Hello, everyone.
And Dr. Shan Kumar. Say hi, Sean.
Hello, everyone.
It is Tuesday, April 14th. It is a hot, hot week. And Kari, if you want to take us away, because I'm sure you got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, boy, we went from let's see, like tight cluster to pink to bloom and most likely petal fall by the end of the week for some folks. I know that's how it is at Freck here. So the I know the topic on everyone's mind with bloom is all this hot weather and fire blight. So let's talk about fire blight for a few minutes. First of all, I just want to say that I did get out a disease alert yesterday talking about this issue. So if you get those emails, it should be in your mailbox. One thing to note is that there is a high risk for fire blight. It doesn't mean it's imminent, it means there's a high risk. So, out of the four components that are necessary to trigger a risk or infection event, we have three of them. And the blossoms are open. We will have met our degree hours, and the bacteria most likely is present with all the pollinators flying around, and with the history of fire blight that we have in Pennsylvania. The component that's missing is a wetting event, and so right now as of this moment at 12:05 p.m. on Tuesday, there is no rain in the forecast for this week, at least through Friday, I believe. Uh, with that said, should you be spraying for fire blight? And my answer is yes, you should. You should put at least at 100% bloom, or by the end of the week, you should put on a protective spray for fire blight. Why is that? You think, I'm wasting my money to do that? No, you're not, because you're going to have straggler blooms that are going to be carrying over to next week. And there's going to be a lot of bacteria in that flower because the high temperatures that are present this week are going to allow that bacteria that could possibly be present on that stigma to replicate to super, super high numbers. That's my official scientific assessment, super high numbers as far as the pathogen load goes. So it would not take much precipitation or high humidity or dew to wash that bacteria from the stigma down into the nectaries. So the idea is that you want to go into the weekend cleaning up your flowers. So any bacteria that could possibly be present, go in with a protective spray and clean up the flowers. So what spray am I talking about? Streptomycin is your best bet. Streptomycin is bactericidal, so it will kill the bacteria. And so when you do that, you're going to reset the clock as far as building that risk, that percent risk again when you spray that streptomycin. And if you have a new weather station, or if you're neighbors with someone who has a new weather station, you can actually go on the fire blight page for that weather station and input your streptomycin application date, and you can actually see the risk numbers recalculate as a result of that. As I myself have been looking at it, trying to figure out when would be a good time to spray our streptomycin sprays. So because sometimes the risk may be so high that when you do the calculation of by a strep application, you may have to go back in after 2 days to reapply strep spray because that weather is just so warm and that it's triggering the bacteria to replicate to high numbers. But for us, I believe one spray should probably be enough this week. So this is a very strong precaution that I am sending over the airwaves here that folks should do. There's no need to panic at the moment because the infection risk is not there yet. We are in a high risk situation, meaning that temperature is going to be jacking up those numbers. So if there is some wetting event, and a wetting event could be a pop-up thunderstorm, and we know what that can be like during this time period where we have these high temperatures going on. The atmosphere could be unstable, and you could have a thunderstorm. So that is just sort of a word to the wise. So what else could you incorporate into that streptomycin spray? Well, definitely Regulate, because Regulate will help with the penetration of the streptomycin. Streptomycin is partially systemic, so it actually will penetrate the nectaries. If you may have some bacteria that slipped into the nectaries, because remember, the bacteria need a natural opening, and right now during bloom, that natural opening are the nectaries for the bacteria to get in there. You could add something like Actigard, 1 to 2 ounces of Actigard. This kicks in after 48 hours after application. This induces the plant defenses. This works. It's expensive, but it's a good investment, especially for young, vulnerable trees. Another thing you could incorporate into your tank mix of your streptomycin spray is something like Apogee or Kudos. This does take about 10 days to kick in, but this is the idea of you putting it in now. It will help with potential shoot blight that may occur later on. Because again, looking at the long range forecast right now, it looks like we're going to have moderate to cool temperatures over the next week. There may be like 1 day or 2 days where it may dip down to the 50s or low 60s, but we're going to be seeing 70s. We're getting into that time where we're most likely sort of finally evening out and having more consistent temperatures. And the 70s are ideal temperatures for Erwinia to continue replicating in the tree if there was an infection event that actually occurred. So you want to be proactive in mitigating fire blight problems, looking down the line. So I always say that when we're managing fire blight, it's just not during bloom. We got to think about it like right before bloom, and also we got to be thinking about it after bloom as well. For folks who may not be at bloom right now, you may want to be incorporating into your fungicide spray a low rate of Apogee or Kudos, because this has shown, especially in vigorous trees, that it will thicken the plant cell walls in the blossom and really slow down and prevent Erwinia getting into that blossom should you have blossom blight conditions manifest. So for folks who may be a little bit further behind, Adams County, this is a suggestion to consider, especially looking at the long range forecast, because once we get into this like regular 70s, it's not going to take much. I mean, this week is crazy with the upper 80s, 90s that we're going to be experiencing. But like between 60 and 70 is the happy place, is the real ideal place for Erwinia to thrive. So we still need to be thinking about those moderate temperatures. As far as organic options go, you've got a couple options that have proved to be helpful in other regions where they've done a little bit more testing than I have. One, Blossom Protect. Blossom Protect here in South Central Pennsylvania is probably the best one so far of the organic options. It's a living yeast. You need to have it in the blossom prior to the infection event. So if you've got open blossoms now is the time. And you're going to have to do it multiple times, because as the blossoms open, you're going to have to reapply as the blossoms open. What this does is it coats the blossoms and it prevents the Erwinia from getting into the nectaries. So it's in New York and Connecticut, the Northeast, this seems to work pretty well. We struggle with it down here in the South Central part where the disease pressure is just a smidge too overwhelming for it. But, this is a year where if you're in an area where it's very hot right now, this is not your option. But if it's going to be blooming next week and you're in more moderate temperatures, this would be a good option for you. As far as other organic options that might be beneficial right now, using the soluble copper, it's Magnabond CS2005. This is a soluble copper, meaning all the copper ions are available at once. So this is in contrast to a fixed copper like Quava or Coside, where your copper ions are bound to a particle and they're slowly released. That's not going to help you in a situation like right now. You need something where all the ions are there, and that is this Magnabond CS2005. A lot of work was done on it in New York. I worked with it a little bit about 10 years ago. But I think I only did it 1 year. Haven't resurfaced it, so I'm going based on results from other locations. But in theory, this seems to be the best copper to use. But I will caution you that all copper has the potential to cause fruit russeting, so use it with caution. Some people have tank mixed it with regalia and have seen benefits with that because regalia can thicken plant cell walls as well. So these are some options. Nothing is going to replace streptomycin at this moment in time. This moment in time for us here in South Central Pennsylvania, streptomycin is your best bet. As far as organic management, having resistant trees is probably your number one line of defense, and then these other options coming in. So as far as moving forward, definitely be thinking about apogee sprays or kudo sprays to protect those shoots, in protecting the shoots to harden off so it limits fire blight. If we get a wetting event during this warm time period, someone's going to get fire blight. It's just the conditions are just so, the risk is so high. And in the years past, I've talked about the epiphytic infection potential. This is the value that's generated when you crunch the numbers, when you've got the min and max temperature, the bloom stage, the presence of fire blight, and a wetting event. Anything over 100, we worry about. And I'll tell you right now, this week we're in the 200s and 300s, which means if we get if we get a wetting event, we're getting fire blight. I mean, the risk is there. So, I don't want people to stress out about it. Be proactive, be prepared to get a protective spray on to clean up the blossoms this week. So that is my word as far as my word of advice. For those behind us, you've got some time, and maybe by the time you get to bloom, you won't have these extreme weathers, and it'll be a much more manageable time period for you. The last thing I want to mention with regards to fungal diseases, a couple things for apples. We are still in a dry period, so powdery mildew is still strong. So we should be still thinking about powdery mildew control. For stone fruit, we are getting up to where rusty spot needs to be controlled. At least here at Freck, some of our stone fruit orchards are at petal fall. Mine are not yet, so I haven't pulled the trigger to put on my petal fall spray to control for rusty spot just yet. And also petal fall would be the time to control for bacterial spot. But we'll talk about that next week because we aren't quite in bacterial spot weather. Even though it's hot, it's not wet. And so when it's hot and dry, it's not really conducive for bacterial spot. So still be on alert for managing at least powdery mildew right now in rusty spot for those who are in those areas. And then for folks that might be behind us, if you're not getting rain, it's still powdery mildew, tight clusters when powdery mildew starts. And also, I just want to note, if in the Adams County area or yesterday, we had some rain that came through. I think it was 0.01 inches of rain fell. That did not trigger a scab infection event, and it did not trigger a fire blight infection event for those in Adams County. So I just want for those to ease anyone's worries. So why didn't it? One, apple scab, not enough wetness hours. It didn't trigger a scab infection event because we didn't have enough leaf wetness hours. For fire blight, we didn't accumulate enough warm hours to trigger an infection event. So even though the blossoms were open, it felt warm outside, but it hadn't been warm enough, long enough while the blooms were open to trigger an infection event. So. And also, I just want to know, I've been seeing currently on NUA, on my NUA weather station page, and then our neighbors next door, it's showing a a fire blight infection event today, and I think that's incorrect because it's saying that we got rain, and we are not registering any rain here at Freck, so I'm not quite sure where the weather station is getting that information. Even with high humidity, it's not enough hours to trigger leaf wetness. Leaf wetness is not even being triggered. It's very, very dry out there. So that is my 12-minute spiel. Don, any questions? Anything that I missed?
No, I think that was really comprehensive, and I think if we throw too much more at folks, they're just gonna
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So thank you for the update. And the point about the weather station miscalculating is super helpful because
Yeah. I checked in Mary Blight based on the weather, and it's not registering even in the Mary Blight program. So I'm not quite sure where it's picking up this 0.05 inches of rain. I'm not quite sure where that's coming from. So,
I don't know, faulty sensors, right?
yeah, who knows?
All right. Awesome. Sean, do you want to give us your update?
Sure. Thanks, Don. Hello, everyone. So last week when we talked about the how the season is going, we talked about the spring freeze. I'm sure all of you looked at temperatures on Wednesday morning that went quite below what was forecasted even for some places. So just to give you a roundup of where temperatures went last week. We were at 26, 25 Fahrenheit in Big Louisville, Adams County. The Freck station showed 26 Fahrenheit. And at the in other regions like Bedford and Ellisburg, station showed anywhere from 21 to 22 Fahrenheit, but the actual temperatures could have been a few degrees lower. I want to specifically mention Rock Springs because the forecasted temperature for Rock Springs was only 23, 22 Fahrenheit. However, the weather station showed us that the temperature went to as low as 17 Fahrenheit, and the actual temperatures in our orchard, which this time we measured, was actually 12 Fahrenheit. So there was a 5-degree difference between where the weather station was and where some of our low-lying spots were, which just goes to show how much of a variation in temperature you can have, especially when you have cold air that's settling in during a freeze event. And so, because of that, in Rock Springs at least, we had severe damage. So around 30 to 40% loss in apples, and so somewhat good thinning. You can think of it that way, and of course it was not complete crop loss. So that's what we are fearing. We were more at tight cluster at around the time we got the freeze, and so I think we'll still have a crop, but it'll be reduced. And so we did lose a lot of our kings and first laterals and things like that, and so we might have smaller fruit. Now in Bedford and Ellisburg, I think that we had similar loss in peaches, especially in Bedford. I'm going to talk about that a little bit first in temperatures. So let's start with Freck, Adams County. And so this is data that is collected by Dr. Sarah that I will present. So let's talk about peaches first, starting with Big Louisville, Adams County. So this was some data that was collected by Dr. Sarah from Freck among the different peach varieties. So most of the peach varieties were at petal fall, and during when we had the frost or full bloom petal fall stage, and we had various degrees of survival. The Coral Star at Freck had only 10% survival, so a major damage. And Starfire had 39% survival. Desiree had 44%, and Cresthaven had 66% survival. And so varying degrees of survival based on variety susceptibility and also elevation, because the places where you have colder air settling in, where you'll see more damage. So definitely for peaches, please check your different blocks before you think about thinning your peaches, especially with a seed. And we'll get to that. In Bedford, we actually saw severe damage to different peach varieties because of how low it went, and things were at full bloom at Bedford. And so the temperatures were as low as 20 Fahrenheit, or sometimes even lower depending on the location. So we had the early Red Haven example was severely hit with only 7% survival, and Glenglow as well had only 15%. And other varieties like July Rose and Glowhaven at Bedford had more survival, but still only around 20 to 25 to 40%. And so the peaches were severely hit in Bedford, and in other places where we went to around 20 Fahrenheit, 18 Fahrenheit, I think it was similar that we had a lot of damage. In State College, in the Red Haven block in a grower's orchard, where we went down to 17 Fahrenheit, where the phenological stage was at first pink, we had about 24% survival. So about quarter of the buds remained. And in Ellisburg, where it went down to 19, 18 Fahrenheit, we had peach varieties with varying levels of susceptibility, but mostly seem to have gotten out well from the frost, because a lot of those varieties were anywhere from calyx red to bloom, and they had approximately 70-80% survival, so which is quite good getting through the frost. And so it really depends on the location. So what I would suggest is to take about 50 to 100 buds, check what percentage of loss you're having, and then decide on the thinning plan for peaches. I know most of you will probably not be using a seed, especially with the frost damage, but for most varieties, unless you were severely hit, you will still need to thin, because if you have anywhere above 50-60% survival from the freeze event, you will still need to thin. And so, so a seed is an option that you can use. And so a seed is labeled for use from pink to petal fall. So this week will probably be the last week that you can use a seed for thinning peaches, especially in the southern part of the state. Of course, we have a little bit more time in the central and northern parts of the state, but for southeast PA and southern PA, this week, especially actually today, tomorrow, day after might be one of the last days, because we are nearing the end of petal fall, for which the peaches are labeled for. And so you can use a label rate from 300 to 600 ppm, which is 10 to 20 ounces of the product per 100 gallons of water. And so usually if you have very minimal damage from the frost, like say you have 80-90% survival, then you can go with the middle rate, 15 ounces per 100 gallons per acre as a standard reference under typical conditions. In blocks where you have reduced crop potential, you can consider lower rates. You can go to 10 ounces per 100 gallons as well. Especially if you have 50-60% survival, I think you can go with the lower rate of the product, which is 10 ounces per 100 gallons per acre. And so again, you have a few days left to apply a seed within the timing that it is being labeled for. And it might be good to do your assessments of the different peach varieties, and especially in Biglerville, in those areas where it doesn't seem like we have too much damage, except for blocks where you have low-lying blocks. Then you might still need to thin. You just have to check different varieties as to how they did from the freeze event, and then use a seed accordingly. But I would suggest that a low rate, 300 ounces per 300 ppm, which is the 10 ounces of the product you can use per acre, will be a good rate to use. And you can also check the Penn State Extension article on a seed used for thinning in peaches. So we are sending out a Fruit Times update as well this evening, and there's a link to that article that gives you some of the seed work that we've been doing, and also it also cites some of the work that was done by Dr. Jim Shoup, testing different varieties for their sensitivity to a seed. And so there's a list of varieties with different susceptibility or sensitivity to a seed. So you can check that to sort of adjust your rates as well, depending on the variety, especially if you have large blocks of a single variety. And so that's for peaches. Now moving on to apples. First, I'm going to talk about how the apples did with the freeze event from last week, and then go on about the phenology and the upcoming weather and some thinning recommendations. And so for the most part, I think we had minimal damage. I think some kings might have been killed from the frost in Biglerville and surrounding areas, but not too much damage to the apples from the spring freeze. It depends on the location, of course. And if you Uh, but it's important to check those blocks. But we have tested a few sites to look at the damage. On average, in Rock Springs, in my own orchard, as well as in Bedford and Ellisburg, for varieties ranging from tight cluster to early pink, but in Gala, Fuji, and Honeycrisp, we had about 65 to 70% survival of buds. So most likely we lost the kings and possibly also a lateral as well, depending on the cluster. And so that is where we are at with the damage from the freeze event. So that obviously will have an effect on how you decide to thin your crop, because you want to make sure that your one or two of your laterals are pollinated before you do any blossom thinning, to make sure that you're not killing off the laterals that will give you the fruits. And so overall survival looks good for apple. And so in most places around the state, we will still have a robust crop of apple. And so, and with the weather this week, oh my God, it's so hot. It's going to be low to mid 80s throughout the week. And so things are going to move very, very quickly. And so again, for apples, I would highly recommend you to check your block to see what sort of damage you've sustained from the freeze event last week. And then you can have an idea of how you want to thin your block. For most places in Pennsylvania, I would still recommend to blossom thin, because you can get an early start to your thinning process, especially if you don't have suitable conditions later on for thinning, when your fruitlets are between 8 to 10 millimeters. So for blossom thinning, especially with things moving so quickly, if you are able to use caustic thinners, you can use them. For example, lime sulfur and oil. Apply 2% lime sulfur, 2% oil at around 60 to 80% full bloom. So the reason I'm saying that is because I'm assuming that in a lot of blocks we've lost the kings. That's not always the case, but at least up where I am and other regions, Southeast PA, I think that there's a good chance that you lost the kings from the fring sprees. So you want to make sure that at least one or two laterals have been pollinated before you apply your caustic thinners. So that's why 60 to 80% full bloom is around the time when you will most likely have your laterals pollinated, and then you can spray lime sulfur and oil, both 2% each. Or ammonium thiosulfate, which you can spray as a foliar fertilizer. It's not registered as a blossom thinner, but it's a common nitrogen-based fertilizer, ammonium thiosulfate, which you can apply at around 2.5 to 3%, around the similar time, around 60% full bloom. The other options you have for blossom thinning, especially in a year like this when bloom is going to happen rapidly because of the temperatures we have, is to use plant growth regulators as well at bloom. And you have a lower risk of taking out like a lot of blossoms with PGRs used at bloom. And so there's two options you could potentially use, and there's more, but two common options where you have NAA, which you can apply at a higher rate, 10 ppm, which is a high rate. I realize that because we usually go with 3 to 5 ppm during fruitlet stage, but they have mild thinning effects as compared to when they're used as a fruitlet thinner. And so you could use 10 ppm, about 2 to 4 ounces per 100 gallons at full bloom. Or if you want a softer product than NAA, you can use NAD, which is amide thin. And so you could use that for around 35 to 50 ppm, or about 4 to 8 ounces per 100 gallons. I know amide thin has been discontinued in the past few years, so if you have any stock left, then amide thin is something you might want to use at full bloom. Both these options, I think, are less aggressive than caustic thinners, but it makes them very suited for use, especially when you have fast compressed bloom periods, especially when we have these warmer temperatures like this. I think that PGRs might work better than caustic thinners, just because of the fact that it's difficult to target them at the right time with caustic thinners because of how fast they're moving. So these are some options for blossom thinning. Again, the one thing I wanted to say was, because of the freeze event last week, I know that there will be reluctance from growers for using blossom thinners. But if you have a good handle on how much loss or damage you've had from the spring freeze event, chances are more likely that you will need to be using blossom thinners in order to start your thinning program early and get a good handle, especially for varieties like Gala, where you can really have an impact on fruit size if you start with blossom thinning. And also for other heavy setting varieties, I think that it'll be good to use good to use blossom thinning, especially in the coming week. The one caution I will say is try to be a little bit careful when you have daytime temperatures exceeding 85 Fahrenheit. So because we don't want to be applying caustic thinners, or we don't want, especially the caustic thinners, we don't want to be applying it when it's above 85 or 90 Fahrenheit. But between 80 to 85 is also fine. I think you can still apply if you have the daytime highs below 85 Fahrenheit. So that's just a caution. But these caustic thinners, as you know, sometimes they could have some phytotoxic effects, but they don't have any effect on fruit quality at the end, because the tree is able to outgrow that very quickly, and those effects sort of disappear in about a week and a half. Some of the phytotoxic effects from either lime sulfur or ATS. But I would definitely recommend to blossom thin this year, despite the freeze event that we had, because it seems like our apple crop got through successfully. We might have lost our kings or maybe even a lateral, but for the most part, I think that we will still need to thin our crop. So we have a very warm week. Things are going to move very fast. So keep an eye on it, and I would highly recommend you think about a blossom thinning spray. And as far as phenology for apples, in Freck, we are at first bloom, and this was data taken yesterday, and you know how fast things are moving with the warm weather. So at yesterday morning, we were for most varieties we were at first bloom, and in Berks as well, it's quite similar, slightly behind. Things were just starting to open up. And in Rock Springs, we're still at tight cluster to early pink. And so that's where we're at with phenology. So yeah, keep an eye on it. See how things are moving, and then plan your blossom thinning sprays, because they are probably going to happen this week, either today, tomorrow, day after. And we're having warm weather. So after this warm weather spell, it seems like we are getting to colder weather towards the end of the week and next week. And so hopefully things will slow down a little bit after that. But we are constantly seeing this seesaw of weather that's getting very warm and then weather that's getting cooler. So one of the things that happens when you have this sort of weather that's up and down a little bit is you have rapid growth. If you have secondary bloom that has, that if you see a secondary bloom that you want to take out, you could use some of your blossom thinners again as well next week to sort of remove those blossoms as soon as they open. But usually that's not necessary, and hand thinning can sometimes take care of some of that, or fruitlet thinning can. But that is an option that's available if you have a heavy secondary bloom that you don't want. Especially when your primary bloom is already progressed farther, and that is going to set and give you a crop. But that's it for me. Don, do you have any questions?
No, Sean, I appreciate the update. I think everyone appreciates the update, and good notes all around. So
Thanks.
Greg, after you.
Yeah, models are only as good as the data that are being fed with. And that's what is happening. Insect-wise, again, it is this kind of spring when and where our custom wisdom might not always still be the correct wisdom. just driving around yesterday, we have basically bloom on peaches, on plums, on cherries, on apples, on pears. Everything is happening in the same moment, which normally should not be happening like this. So bear with me when I go to different pests and then think how you guys need to protect your crop, assuming that the crop is on the trees. I did not participate in the last week call. I'm assuming you guys covered the frost event from that happened. I keep hearing, from people that they lost all the peaches in one block, but they still have peaches in another block and so on. Kari shared this information from Virginia, which sounds terrifying if they even have a crop over there on apples. But again, it's everything might be location and what happened before the frost. It was lower than expected and we lost some. Insect-wise, the last time I talked with you, I told you guys that probably we will have the biofix over the last weekend, and we did. We actually got a very good flight on Friday night, and then today is Tuesday, and we keep getting a lot of moths in the trap of Oriental fruit moth. So we officially established biofix here at FREC on the 11th of April. So if NUA is calculating any degree accumulations and so on for us, it actually calculates from the 11th. It will be good if everyone who use NUA know the biofix for his or her location. It really helps NUA to be more precise. This is about how good the model or program is, depends on how good the feeder's data is. So Oriental fruit moth is flying, red banded is flying, spotted tentriform leaf miner is flying, Persilla is flying. What is not flying right now is codling moth. We still have time. I think this will be another case when trees will be ahead of the actual pressure from this insect. 2 years ago, I think we were in the situation that the first timing for controlling codling moth was not our usual first cover, but actually it was second cover. Again, I don't know how the weather will go. I don't know how long the bloom will last, because everything will explode this week, but with the normal or colder, more normal weather coming after this week, this bloom might, last for another 3 or 4 weeks. Who knows? I mean, we've been there before, we have seen it before. If we're talking about controlling insect right now, peaches are really the biggest challenge. The reason I'm saying this is as soon as the fruit become big enough for curculio to start feeding on them, actually curculio might start doing damage. We normally don't think about it because, well, it's a petal fall on apples and there's a curculio spray and so on. Well, curculio can move to the orchard much, much earlier than at petal fall on apples. Curculio overwinter as adults, and the weather conditions we have and going to have for the next at least 4 or 5 days, a perfect weather condition for plum curculio. So is it worth it to protect fruit, start protecting fruit right now? Probably yes, if you know that you have a problem with curculio in the past, your orchard is next to the woods or pile of dead woods or something like this. Maybe one protective spray of something, some insecticide that is active on adults will knock them down, because we will be dealing with the curculio for a long time. It's not like it will be over in 2 weeks, because the weather will fluctuate and the activity will fluctuate. So this is something to worry about, but only on peaches. And the same is with oriental fruit moth. I mean, knowing that biofix happen on last Saturday, by end of this weekend, there will be larvae that actually should start, eggs that should start hatching, and oriental fruit moth larvae will be around. What they will go after? Well, most likely they won't go after the fruit. They will go after growing shoots on peaches, on terminals. So if you go after plum curculio, I think you will get also good enough control for oriental fruit moth on peaches. On apples, well, they flying, they will lay eggs, but the fruit will not be there for a long time. So any injury on apples actually will be injuries also to growing shoots. Is this a time to control, to worry too much? Well, again, it might depend from the history, from the past. If you had a problem, if the pressure was very high the previous years, well, the first time you can spray anyway will be at petal fall. And this might be next week, or it might be at 2 weeks from now, or 3 weeks from now. It depends from the cultivar. We're trying to protect fruit. I have never seen strong enough shoot damage on apples caused by oriental fruit moth that would warrant using insecticides to control it. So again, it's a matter of decision. On peaches, if you know you have crop and we stay with the warm weather, plum curculio and oriental fruit moth. On apples, well, you don't have to control curculio until fruit are not there. So we have time, and codling moth does not need to be controlled. One thing that some of you might have a experience with or be afraid of is European apple sawfly. This is another insect that's developed usually during the bloom on apples. This one, we don't know enough to say that they will come during the bloom, but the normal biology is that European apple sawfly is flying during the bloom on apples, depositing eggs on the flowers, and then the egg hatch and the larva goes into the fruit. Again, a lot depends from the weather, but this might be something that if there was a problem in the past, then you might need to pay attention. On pears, well, Persilla. I hope everyone was able to do at least 1 or 2 treatments for Persilla. Oil, twice oil, maybe oil plus pyrethroid. Even if it sounds like a strange treatment, they would pay later on during the season. Because all those treatments before the bloom were to kind of synchronize better the hatch of eggs and the development of Persilla. If you didn't do it, as soon as the bloom on pears is done, application of Agrimec, it's still Agrimec. I still think Agrimec will give you enough control at this time to help you later on during the season. I mentioned this product before, I will say it again. The petal fall spray on both apples and peaches, but I'm afraid this will be quite stretch in time because peaches petal fall, it might be tomorrow. I mean, as crazy as it sounds. There is this new product, Zivalgo. If you follow the label and all the registration parts, and documenting that you are eligible to use Zivalgo. Zivalgo is a very broad spectrum product. And from my observation, this is a perfect product to be used at petal fall, maybe petal fall first cover, depends from how codling moth goes. It will control oriental fruit moth, it will control plum curculio. It actually also work on Persilla. We don't have data on European apple sawfly, but have no reason to doubt that it will work. So this might be a good product. When to use it is another question, but again, we are talking petal fall spray. And not before, because I think it would be waste of time, waste of resources to use it before petal fall. But, if you're gonna go right now with those peach spray targeting OFM larvae or plum curculio, a sale is a good option. Avant is good option. Zivalgo will be more broad spectrum, should provide very good control, but I would wait with it for at least the timing on, well, if we use the apple petal fall timing for also spray on peaches, I think that's when it actually will be the most effective. That's when it will help the most with plum curculio and OFM. Again, depends how long the bloom will last. OFM might finish egg hatching before we're done with the petal fall. And then there's not a lot we can do because there is but because of bees. And we're not talking only honeybees. There's a lot of talks and a lot of good data supporting the idea that our native bees, especially in the orchards that are bordering with some wild vegetation, that those bees are actually very helpful in the orchard. They work under better, more diverse weather conditions. They work better in the colder weather than honeybees would, and they are very effective. So please do not spray when the blossoms or there is anything in the orchard that bees or wild pollinators can be attracted to. And this also includes dandelions in the ground cover. I have seen orchard just at petal fall. Yes, there were no flowers on the trees, but the understory was basically yellow. How many dandelions was there? If you run into something like this, just take the mower, take out the dandelions first, and then go and spray. I have actually seen, but that was more propaganda than the real world, when the guy had sprayer and mower behind the same tractor. I mean, on the same tractor, sorry. It was on the same tractor. But again, the point is the bees, pollinators will come to flowers, not necessarily apple flowers. They will go to any flowers. And if we're trying to protect them, controlling anything blooming in the ground cover is as important as waiting for a petal fall on the trees. So that's all I have right now. We'll see how the weather goes. We'll see how the trees develop. We will start our meetings that's supposed to be the before petal fall meetings in the week of 27th. Uh, who knows? Who knows? I mean, we moved the meeting from the first week of May to the last week of April. Now, maybe next year we will have to move them to the April 20th. I mean, it is what it is. The season getting longer. It's getting more complicated from many aspects. And one of them is that the insects start developing differently. And if we have oriental fruit moth flying on the 11 and they will start laying eggs, and we don't go into a very colder time period, we might have extra generation either of OFM or codling moth as the season goes. We might also end up with extra generation of plum curculio in August. it's possible with season starting that early. I mean, states south from us, they are having two generation of plum curculio. And our weather right now is, well, much more similar to Virginia than to New York. So it is what it is. So that's all updates I have right now. Let's hope we can talk next week, and then we'll see how it develops. One last thing, mating disruption. If anyone plans to have mating disruption, please put it ASP to your apple and peach blocks. Codling moth is not flying. I do not expect codling moth to fly, even if this hot weather. I mean, we might get some, early risers by the end of this week, but I really think by following weekend, the weekend of the 25th, I would be surprised if the codling moth is not active. So put the mating disruption out as soon as you can, and it will help. It's not program that will eliminate all your problems, but it will help make some of those problems much less severe. That's basically what it is. So remember about mating disruption. That's all I have. If there are any questions, Dan, maybe something popped, or maybe you heard from growers, I would be happy to, respond.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. No, it's actually been pretty quiet on the insect front. For the most part, folks are mostly just panicked about the strange weather patterns, quote unquote, and strange seems to be getting less strange year after year. So it is what it is. So, Kara,
Do you want me to run through the list now, the completed list for the spring meetings?
yeah, if you've got it
Okay.
up.
Yep, I do. Okay. All right, folks. So our spring meetings are starting in 2 weeks, with the first one being on Tuesday, April 28th. It's in Lancaster County. It's going to be at the Masonic Village Orchard in Elizabethtown, and it's 6 to 8 p.m. So all these meetings, unless otherwise I state it, which on the last day, will be from 6 to 8 p.m. On Wednesday, April 29th, this was the Adams County meeting. It's going to be held at Adams County Nursery in Aspers, PA. On Thursday, April 30th, in Franklin County, we're going to be at Harlan Hess's farm in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. On Monday, May 4th, this is the Columbia County Central Susquehanna Northeast meeting, and we're going to be at OHF Orchards in Bloomsburg. On Tuesday, May 5th, this is the Southeast region meeting. It's going to be in Delaware County, and it's at Linvilla Orchards in Media, Pennsylvania. On Wednesday, May 6th, this is the Western PA meeting. It's going to be in Lawrence County at Dawson's Orchards in Enon Valley. And then last, this is the Goofy Day, Thursday, May 7th. In the morning, this is the Erie County meeting. It's going to be at Birch Farms Country Market in Northeast Pennsylvania, and that's from 10 to 12 p.m. And then we're going to be driving down to Bedford County, where our Bedford County Appalachian Region meeting will occur at Boyer Orchards, and that's in New Paris, Pennsylvania. And that will be from 5:30 to 7:30, so it's a smidge earlier. The meetings are currently being populated on our website, on the extension website, a few at a time. So just keep a lookout, and hopefully we'll see folks there.
Yeah, fingers crossed I get all those up and in and ready to go, because apparently
Right now
that's
we've got
my
two. We have two
Oh.
there. Yay.
Well, all right. Hey, I'm swinging for the fences. Cool. So, anything else for the good of the order?
Just as a reminder, I just want to say it again, if I didn't emphasize, not about fire blight, powdery mildew. Because I was actually, while Greg was chatting, I kind of zipped online and looked at RimPro, which is a European prediction model for diseases and insects. And it is crazy for powdery mildew, meaning spores are very much flying around, and we've got several major infection events because it's been so dry. So please, I talked about ad nauseum powdery mildew this winter during Hershey and during the winter meetings. You know what to do. we're in powdery mildew weather. So hopefully people have gotten some good powdery mildew control. This is going to be especially important for rusty spot coming up for stone fruit trees going into petal fall. Just want to put the public service announcement there out there again.
That's all right. One good last PSA. All right. With that, we will jump off here and I will try and get this edited since this is extremely timely. Thank you guys all for listening. Kari, Greg, Shan, thank you guys for being on here. Say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye. Good luck.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Let's hope the weather cooperates.
Fingers crossed.